Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Hello, gentle listeners. Welcome back to the Fort Worth Masonic podcast, and we thank you all for tuning in.
My name is Evve Kirkendall. I am the Senior Warden of Fort Worth 148.
My name is Brandy Patton. I'm the Secretary of Fort Worth 148.
My name is Gabe Yagish, and I am the Marshal of Fort Worth 148 and a past master thereof.
And I am Cody Cox. I am the current musician for Fort Worth number 148 and also District Deputy Grand Master of Masonic District number 64A.
All right, folks. And so I know that Rit will probably announce it in our intro. You know, you have that standard disclaimer that we give every episode. But just as a reminder, everything that we say on this podcast is our own opinions. It's not the opinions of Fort Worth Lodge as an entity, and it is not the opinions of any lodge, grand body of any kind or Masonic organization. This is just the few of us in the recording studio voicing our opinions. So figured that goes without saying, but got to repeat it anyway, especially because this episode we're talking about resolutions and recommendations for Grand Lodge communication, which is coming up very shortly. You know, we encourage people to study the resolutions and make up their own minds, and this is just the four of us blowing hot air.
We're a very urban lodge in DFW. We've got a lot of members, and a lot of lodges meet in the same place. We're probably different than more rural ones. So yeah, take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. So,
and I think the most important thing to think about with all of this as well is that if you are a voting member in the Grand Lodge, it really is important for you to show up and have your voice heard at the Grand Communication. So hopefully the things that we say today help you to make a good decision, even if it's not the same thing that we say, but hopefully it informs you and leads you to contributing to the process.
And let's be honest, so many of us go to Grand Lodge for the camaraderie and the fraternal brotherhood that goes on there. I think in a lot of ways the resolutions are just a fun part of going there to listen to the resolutions and see how they come out. But I'm really looking forward to the Grand Communication for the fraternal spirit that is always there. So I'm anxious to endeavor to be more brotherly this year in that regard.
You already are.
I already am.
Come help steer the ship.
Right? And of course, you know, we're going to be in that delightful location that 148 is always in.
Yeah. Hey, no secrets. Nope, no secrets.
We'll be in our undisclosed location.
Our bunker across the street.
There you go. All right. So I guess let's go ahead and launch into them. Sure. The first one in our booklet is 2020 Holdover Resolution number 11. And we'll go through that real
2022.
Quickly. Whereas Article 2 of the Laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas requires that business shall only be conducted when the Grand Lodge is called to labor. And whereas only Master Masons in good standing may be present when so called. And whereas the current state of technology provides no means by which to ensure that others who are not authorized to attend might be able to witness such proceedings if broadcast, therefore be it resolved that the following language be added to Chapter 2, Title 1, Article 2 of the Laws of this Grand Lodge. And it adds a paragraph. When the Grand Lodge is called to labor, no audio or visual representation of such proceeding shall be permitted either by transmission, live streaming, or other means of communication. These provisions shall not apply to transmissions within the Grand Lodge Memorial Temple. And it's submitted by more than a dozen past masters. And so I guess how do we feel about that, guys?
Well, I'll dive off into the deep end of the swimming pool. I'm not a big fan of this holdover resolution. I wasn't a fan of it last year when it was brought up, and I'm still not a fan of it. I think that it codifies a restriction that we don't know how the world is going to play out in the future, and it restricts the Grand Lodge in such a way as to prevent a tool from being used in the time of some sort of natural disaster or national emergency or other restriction where we can't get together in person or only in a limited fashion in person. And to say that that we can't do that by resolution, it seems very short-sighted to me. I would much rather it be left to the grandmasters and the grand bodies' better judgment and not have such restrictive language used. It seems very technophobic to me. And then there's also I think the reality that that technology is to be used, and it has been used successfully in the past, and we should embrace that and give our grandmaster and our grand body the most flexibility when we're planning grand communication.
I think another thing too that needs to be said is that a lot of the arguments that were kind of put forth last year when this was being discussed, and even some of the arguments that I've heard since then, in my opinion, are kind of the straw man arguments. Again, the fact that we're kind of planning for the worst. The idea that there is some 13-year-old at home that is going to hack into the Grand Lodge of Texas so that he can see what we're doing during Grand Lodge, the probability of that is very, very small. The other thing that I would point to is in the language where it says, these provisions shall apply to transmissions within the Grand Lodge Memorial Temple. For any of us who have been to Grand Lodge communication for any amount of time, know that on any day during Grand Lodge, there are ladies in the Grand Lodge building as well for various types of reasons. So if we're afraid of it getting out into the public by doing it over, over the, on the computer, then broadcasting it to televisions or something like that within the temple building, where it could potentially be seen by, our wives or whatever, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing. So I don't really see how this is going to solve that problem, and I would agree that we are that we're kind of cutting ourselves off at the ankles way too early. And if this went through, we would be restricting ourselves, and we would have a lot of undoing to do later on if we have to do this one more time.
Agreed, and I think that to your point, the Grand Lodge building is not tiled. Literally anybody can walk into that building while grand communication is going on. The basement door is always open. Anybody off the street can walk into the Grand Lodge Memorial Building, at least in the basement level, and then wander around as they see fit. They might not be able to get into the tiled meeting, but if it's being broadcast through the Grand Lodge Memorial Building, it's no more secure than if it's being broadcast via encrypted stream to lodges across Texas.
Yeah.
And so I know we have another resolution that is going to address a very similar subject moving forward. But again, I just have a really hard time.
To clarify, though, the auditorium part of it is strictly tiled.
Of course.
Yeah. And something that I'd like to bring up is that one of the things that I noticed was, and I'm going to say, via social media, because we don't get to see these guys very often, but there were brothers that said, that commented via Facebook or, via other methods that said, man, I really enjoyed being able to tune in to the broadcast when we had the broadcasted transmissions of the Grand Lodge session, because these guys said, I don't get to go to Waco anymore. I'm not well enough to travel, or, I just don't feel safe leaving my house, because of the pandemic at the time. But most of these guys that I saw commenting online are guys that I have met, off and on again through Masonry, but that don't get out very much in general, because pandemic or no pandemic, they're not leaving their house much anyway, right? Just they don't have the ability to travel. And that brought these guys a lot of value. And they were, Some of these guys couldn't vote, some of these guys were able to, some of them are not voting members. Some of them were. In all cases, they just enjoyed being able to see it and participate again like they used to be able to do. So I think especially for a lot of our older members who are maybe not able to travel again, at least being able to tune in, maybe not necessarily vote, but being able to tune in and listen and watch is inherently kind of a valuable experience.
Well, we're also in the great state of Texas where you can drive 10 hours in any direction and still be in the great state of Texas. A lot of guys may have to fly into Waco from the edges of the state.
It's worth noting that the business of the Grand Lodge, while it is considered private, the actual, the parliamentary procedure that we go through is not inherently secret, right? It's private, it's privileged, right? But we are not conveying Masonic secrets. And for portions of time where ritualistic or other secret information is being performed or given or communicated, that transmission was turned off for that period of time.
And there was a delay too.
That's exactly what I was about to say. There is the reality that it was broadcast on a delay, so it wasn't the people who were out in the audience on the network that it was being transmitted through. They weren't seeing it literally live.
Yeah.
That at any moment, if something went sideways or there was some piece of information that
like a standard,
there was a dump button. Literally, somebody could push a button and suddenly the transmission went black for a period of time to cover up anything that should not be communicated. Well, so there are safeguards being put in place, and the people who are responsible for this were very responsible, in my opinion, in making sure that this was as respectfully done as possible and respected our rules and traditions of Freemasonry. And I have no reason to believe that moving forward, such respect wouldn't even be redoubled. Yeah. Knowing that there is this many past masters out there who are willing to sign their name to this resolution with concerns. And those concerns are, I would also stipulate, are very, very valid. We don't want our secrets out there in the public domain. We don't. And so if we want to safeguard it to the maximum extent possible, but at the same time, making sure that, let's say that something happens in Waco and we can't have grand communication in Waco for some reason. We need to have provisions in place while we might choose another city, or we might choose another way of having grand communication. We don't want to handcuff our leaders with resolutions that at some point are going to have to be undone.
And that was something that was very beneficial for the Grand Commandery of Texas. Because for 2 years in a row, the Grand Commandery of Texas held its Grand Conclave virtually. And the second one had kind of like a hybrid approach because the installation was in person and it was done, with all the officers there. I thought it was very well conducted and it went well. And I think it was a resounding success. And then I was part of the team that helped make it work the second year in a row, and that worked out very well as well. So all in all, having that ability, that flexibility was hugely to our benefit.
And I think one of the things that we would be remiss to mention as well is that a lot of the concerns that we've voiced even in this conversation are being addressed in a later resolution, which I think is also makes this resolution even less less of something that I would be willing to support. Yeah. Because I think many of the problems are addressed in a reasonable way that gives enough restrictions to this happening, but also provides the flexibility that we may need at some future time.
But also kind of crazy, but can't you order the Grand Lodge proceedings from the Grand Lodge website that kind of covers everything that we talk about at Grand Lodge anyway?
That's correct.
I think the concern, though, is that someone might see the ritualistic or the genuinely secret stuff that isn't published.
But again, those safeguards are in place.
Absolutely.
And Gabe, to go back to what you were saying with Grand, the Grand Commandery and all that kind of stuff, we all know that the first time that you do something, there are going to be mistakes. So just because there are some mistakes that are made the first time doesn't mean that you totally abandon the plan. Yeah. You need to give it time to come to fruition. So, I'll go back to the argument that this resolution seems to be cutting us off at the ankles before we even get a chance to get rolling.
Well, and I think we also just need to throw out there too, all of the people or all of the arguments. It's not necessarily these people that are for this obviously have some very valid concerns. I think that it's important to say that we're not suggesting that I am certainly not for people online who are watching from either their lodge or some other remote location be allowed to vote. I think that that's problematic. I think that largely speaking that there needs to be restrictions about where the venue can be streamed to.
Right.
I think that there needs to be restrictions on viewership. I think that we need to take reasonable precautions. Nobody wants our proceedings out there in the public domain.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about resolution number 1. So this is the beginning of our new resolutions. And so this one is a lengthy one. I'll read the whereases and then I'll summarize the changes. Resolution number 1. Whereas the lodge is required to pay Grand Lodge a per capita for each member of the lodge, whereas Master Masons who are members of multiple lodges have multiple lodges paying per capita on them. Whereas Article 318A sets forth the rules for endowed memberships. Whereas the minimum endowment of 5 units of $100 rarely covers the cost of per capita. Whereas local lodges, especially small lodges, struggle financially, and the minimum endowment amount provides a net negative to the lodge for living, qualified members. Whereas Anson Jones was the first Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of the Republic of Texas, and often considered the father of Texas Freemasonry, therefore be it resolved that the Anson Jones per capita endowment fund be created as follows. And I'm going to summarize this to the best of my ability. Article 163D, Anson Jones per capita endowment fund. Clause number 1 basically says that any Mason who's in good standing of all the lodges he's a member of in Texas, and when we say in good standing, we mean dues are up to date and everything. He's not suspended. He can purchase into the endowment fund, right? And it'll exempt him from per capita for a specific lodge, right? Item 2. The units are $100, and he has to purchase no less than 10 endowment units, right? So $1,000. Every lodge that he's a member of needs a separate endowment, right? 2B is that a deceased Master Mason can have an endowment purchased for him in the amount of $500 or 5 endowment units. C is a 50-plus year Mason or residents of the Texas Masonic Retirement Community can purchase for the same price, $500, and they'll list them in a special list. And an endowed member who wants to support the Grand Lodge can add to his endowment in units of $100 or multiples. And then item 3, the Anson Jones Lodge Endowment Fund is basically going to be supervised by the Grand Lodge trustees, and they're the ones that direct it as necessary. 3B, the endowment funds shall be composed of endowment units of $100, and so the value of each unit can change, the net asset value, right? Not the value, changes from time to time as necessary. This is a lot. And so it goes on. There's C, D, E. It describes the payout of each endowment unit. It describes how they're valued. It describes how the Grand Secretary issues these endowments to the members. And it describes that, item number 6, a special pin and coin will be created by the past Grand Masters to show inclusion into the Anson Jones Lodge Endowment Fund. And then everybody that purchases an endowment for the first time gets that special past Grand Masters pin, basically. And item 7 basically says that the per capita relief is not transferable from lodge to lodge. And then there's some clauses regarding consolidated lodges and demised lodges. And it says, and item 8 basically says, hey, you're still subject to all our rules and laws. And then number 9 says that on the death of the endowment holder, the Grand Lodge still continues to receive income from it. And that makes sense because it still exists. So let's talk about this one. This is a pretty large bulky one. I know that a lot of times when we talk about financial stuff, that tends to be the case simply because financial stuff can get really complicated. How do we feel about this, guys?
What we're creating here is another endowment fund to shore up the problems with our original endowment fund,
Right.
to cover the cost. And it's a minimum of $1,000 investment.
Yeah.
Well, if you took that $1,000 and spent 2 more units of your lodge's endowment of $500, you would in all likelihood shore up that shortfall of your per capita. And then if the issue is that per capita, the valuation that you get back, the returns on your endowment fluctuates from year to year, and it may or may not cover the cost of per capita. Well, what's to guarantee that this new endowment fund is going to provide enough money to cover the per capita? So what ends up happening is you exempt a whole bunch of people who buy this from the per capita, and then the Grand Lodge ends up not getting the amount of money they need per capita to remain solvent. And so, because all of these people went out and spent $1,000 in this Anson Jones endowment fund, rather than just putting it in the regular endowment fund. Mm-hmm. And rather than lodges have a number that is financially solvent for them to make sure that an endowment covers not only the necessary dues of that person's lifetime, but also covers per capita. This is a Band-Aid designed to solve a gaping wound of the original endowment fund, and it is nails on a chalkboard to me. And that is no disrespect to the author of this. I have no doubt that the person and the people who are supporting this have nothing but the best of intentions to try to fix an endowment system that is opaque at best.
Sure. And, I think that this does try to do a useful thing in addressing the net negative that often happens with per capita. But yeah, it's true. There is a more systematic problem with how endowments work, right?
Well, and the other thing that I'll bring to the table with this one is that for me, when I'm looking at the resolutions, I do look at the whereas, because I want to figure out why the person that's writing this resolution thinks that this resolution needs to be out there. So this is the reasoning. And I want to point to where it says, whereas local lodges, especially small lodges, struggle financially. I think right there we're hitting something that needs to be addressed in a different matter, and that is the idea of small lodges struggling financially. I will speak to this one because another lodge that I belong to, we have had financial struggles, and we've had to make decisions in order to make sure that we can still operate. By writing resolutions and trying to make it to where the Grand Lodge is going to somehow magically solve your problems without you having to have difficult decisions and difficult discussions at the lodge level, I think is skirting the issue. At my lodge, we had to have these difficult conversations. We had to talk about raising the per cap, or, raising the endowment from 500 where we had it to a much higher rate, because we knew that people would just purchase endowments so that they didn't ever have to pay dues again, and it was draining on us. We had to have those conversations. We had to talk about, turning off lights at a particular time and working with air conditioning and stuff like that. So this resolution is about money and about lodges that need money. And by coming up with a resolution just saying, hey, why don't we just purchase these $1,000 endowments so that people can, so that the lodge can cover what's not happening with the endowments currently, is side-skirting the issue that a lot of lodges need to have discussions about their financial situation.
Go ahead.
I love the fact that it mentions more like $1,000 is reasonable for endowment to cover your per capita. The problem is the per capita doesn't cover lodge operations, which you just talked about, because you do have to pay rent, you have to pay electricity. Forward 148, we're very fortunate. We actually had a positive on the cash flow from the endowment fund this year. A couple $100 more than we paid per capita. But you can't run the lodge on that. I mean, we've got a building. We pay another $37 per member per year.
Yeah.
if you do it properly, I love endowments, but the minimum $500 is just kind of ridiculous because there's no way you're going to be able to pay per capita or run a lodge on that. If everybody's dead, hey, it works great. But unfortunately,
which is what an endowment is designed for. It's not designed for living members.
It's designed, it's designed for once you're gone.
And something to kind of keep in mind, based off of the returns that we have historically seen from the endowment fund averaged out, in order to run your lodge off of endowments, your endowment number or your endowment amount basically has to be somewhere between, depending on who's done the math, 30 to 35 times your dues or your annual dues amount, right? So, that can be a lot, right? So, if your lodge's dues are $100, then, your endowment might have to be $3,500 in order to make it work, in order to cover that.
And that's the problem that I have with this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what these endowments are designed to do and what they're not designed to do. They are designed to provide income to a lodge after the life of an endowed member. Whenever I got endowed at my mother lodge, and the people who told me about this in our lodge, fundamentally, I don't believe fully understood what this meant, because now I as an endowed member send money for my per capita every year back to my lodge to make sure that I'm not a drain on my mother lodge's finances because of the endowment system that is set so low.
Right. Is your mother lodge buying more endowment units, or are they just paying you per capita?
I'm paying their per capita for me because I purchased my endowment, which was the value of 1 year.
Well, you're making a donation. So Gabe's the only one in this room that's endowed to our lodge currently. He actually donated the dues amount exactly. Yeah. So it'd be 3.5 endowment. You get 3 endowment units roughly per year. Mm-hmm. If everyone if you do the $500 endowment and you do it for 5-6 years and everyone buys it 5 or 6 years, it works. Because you're donating, you're buying more endowment units. It does actually make sense, but you have to explain it that way when you sell it.
And we can't ignore the performance of the stock market and where these endowment funds we're going into, what investments these are going into. Over the last several years, the stock market has been performing incredibly well, and it's still not covering per capita. Right. So if it's not covering your per capita in banner years for stock market performance, what's going to happen when we're in a recession?
Not good stuff.
Well, that's ultimately my point, is that we can't keep throwing good money after bad like this. And this resolution doesn't address this. And now, while it tries to address the per capita issue, it doesn't address the underlying issue of endowments, which is my biggest pet peeve.
Yep. Right on. So let's talk about, or we're actually not going to talk about resolution number 2. Resolution number 2 is a name change for a lodge. Pentagon Lodge and Highland Park Lodge merged, and they want to change their name to Pentagon-Highland Park Lodge number 1080. Best of luck to them.
It's not offensive. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Resolution number 3 is and kind of what we call an administrative resolution, right? That one has to do with filing dates and when we turn in stuff. And it's being submitted by Justin Duty, who is the Right Worshipful Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge, right? So this is something that makes the Grand Lodge's job easier. Resolution number 4, we may want to have a little bit of discussion here. This is kind of, it's another administrative resolution, but it moves us forward in a little bit more into the digital age, right? This is... It basically eliminates the need for a certificate of good standing in a lot of ways. And the reason why I want to bring it up is because we actually do have our lodge secretary here. And Brandy, also
submitted by Justin Duty.
Yeah. And it is submitted by the Grand Secretary. So this basically eliminates the need for the certificate of good standing in a lot of cases, right? How do you, as secretary of a lodge, how do you feel about this?
I mean, if you've got a valid Texas dues card and you want to join another Texas lodge, what's the difference? I can look certain members can look in Grandview and see the status. There's really no point in it. And it's not like the issuing lodge can say, no, we don't want you to affiliate with this lodge. Yeah. That's really the only possible reason I can see for it. It's less paperwork for me. I love it.
Right. So, because, you know, as secretary, you can see if somebody that's petitioning our lodge for affiliation is not dues current, right?
Technically, I can't. I can call the Grand Secretary's office. I can email them, and I can find out. Certain district officers may have access.
Sure.
Certain Grand Lodge officers may have access. I can't look at someone who's not a member of my lodge and see if they're current, but it's just a matter of a phone call or an email. It's easy.
Right. So this simplifies things a lot for...
Well, in largely speaking, it would seem to me that a secretary of any lodge isn't going to be giving out a dues card until said dues-paying member has paid the dues for that year.
Ideally, yes.
In an ideal world.
Right.
We can also investigate them if we want to. We don't have,
Absolutely.
it's not
Well, and I
automatic.
think the other thing that we're kind of forgetting here is that even though he has a valid dues card, the lodge still has to vote to allow him to affiliate. And in that time, by the time he says, "Hey, I'd like to affiliate with this lodge," the secretary should have plenty of time in order to contact either the Grand Lodge or that brother's lodge and actually validate and make sure that he is in good standing with said particular lodge.
It would be nice to know why they want to affiliate with another lodge. I mean, if our dues are too high and they're going to join another lodge, I'd like to know why. Maybe we can work with that individual. That's come up. Otherwise, I mean, if you want to affiliate with every lodge in Texas, more power to you. I don't know why you're doing it. It's crazy, but go for it.
And by the way, if you're listening to this, just understand that this resolution is only striking out where the certificate of good standing is used to apply for plural membership. You still are going to have a certificate of good standing if you want to transfer your membership to another lodge or if you want to sign the petition to start a new lodge. So you're still going to have the actual certificate of good standing for that one. This just makes it easier if you want to become a plural member at a different lodge.
And it does not eliminate the need for certificates of good standing for other jurisdictions either.
Right.
So if somebody's coming from Oklahoma, they still have to have a certificate of good standing from their grand jurisdiction. If somebody from our jurisdiction of Texas is going to Oklahoma,
There are jurisdictions that
still
don't
going
do
to need
certificates
that.
of good standing, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's a matter of just talking to the Grand Secretary. And if my Grand Secretary says it's okay, it's okay.
Yep. So all in all, good stuff.
I love it. Go for
Yeah.
it. Less paperwork.
And then here, resolution number 5 is basically the ability. It gives lodges the ability to provide a digital seal to authenticate official documents. Right. So this, in many ways, brings us in line with a lot of the rest of the world. You know, we're joining the 21st century, right? Digital seals are like digital signatures, right? For the most part, there's very few industries where you have to have a wet signature, where you have to have a physical seal on something. Nowadays, you can apply digital versions of those things. I guess, do we have any comments on this one?
I support it again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can look and see the stamp on a document and a picture, all for it. Which
I would like to mention, though, that if somebody is listening and you are a member of a small rural lodge or even a big lodge that wants to do things traditionally, notice that in the language of the resolution, it says the lodge may, at its option, provide itself with a digital seal. So it's not saying that you have to have a digital seal.
Yeah.
It's saying that you have the option to do that. So again, allowing the lodges to have a little bit of freedom with that one.
And flexibility.
Yeah.
Flexibility is the name of the game in my book, and this gives lodges the flexibility. If you were a technologically advanced lodge and you feel like it's going to bring you into the 21st century to do so, God bless and go forward. If you like your analog paper, God bless and go forward. We love you for
support the
it.
U.S. Postal System.
I
by all means.
support the U.S. Postal Service.
Trust
God bless
me,
and go forward.
I send plenty of letters via stone mail.
I was going to say, even in the digital age, you know, if you're a Masonic lodge, there's no way to escape physical mail, right? But yeah, that's an important clarification to make, right? This is an optional thing. All right, let's talk about resolution number 6. I'll go through the full text of it because it's kind of a short one. Whereas Article 397 asserts that the Grand Lodge does not presume to prescribe any canonical volumes of sacred law and explicitly allows for candidates to be obligated on their book of chosen faith situated upon the altar in front of the Holy Bible during the conferral of the 3 degrees of Masonry, and whereas, once obligated, there may be other occasions, including the installation of officers or stated or called meetings, where officers and members of a lodge may wish to rely on the guidance and support of the book of their chosen faith, and whereas Article 223 enumerates the minimum necessary furniture and paraphernalia of the lodge room, including the Holy Bible, and whereas Article 127 says that the only permissible paraphernalia to be used is that listed in Article 223, therefore be it resolved that Article 223 be amended by adding the following under necessary paraphernalia for lodges in Texas. Article 223, Security and Furnishings Approval by Grand Master. Necessary paraphernalia for lodges in Texas. 1. Holy Bible, square and compasses for altar. No change. This is the addition. 1A. Additional volumes of sacred law if requested by candidates or members of the lodge and approved by the worshipful master. Sections 2 through 17, no changes. I would start this off by saying that this is less contentious than a lot of people think it is as written. I know that there may be some emotional discussion around this because it deals with volumes of sacred law, but I actually am looking at this from a more of a paperwork and law as written perspective. What do we feel about this, guys?
Well, I will go ahead and start off with this one because, I spoke to one of the authors of this resolution because I wanted to make sure that I understood this to the best of my ability. And I asked specifically why it was written in the particular manner that it was, and it was relayed to me that this was written in a way to, again, allow lodges to make the decision for themselves. But this was mainly written as a way to correct Grand Lodge law, because we have one article that says one thing, and then we have another article that says something kind of completely on the other side. So this resolution is written in a way to correct that disagreement in the law. So I know that is one thing. The intent of this, again, is to allow the lodges to have that kind of autonomy to make that decision for themselves.
So to clarify and to make sure that this point is stepped on a little bit, what Cody is referring to is the way in which in one article it says that the furniture of the lodge is these certain things, including the Holy Bible, but it does not include other volumes of holy text. And whereas it says in another where other volumes of holy text can be used during conferral situations, those two, and it does not include the extra holy texts in the mirroring article. This resolution harmonizes those two so that the other volumes of sacred text are part of the furniture of the lodge, and so both of these are now in agreement with one another. That is the big legal issue, I think, that's being resolved here that Gabe is talking about. That it isn't about the visceral and religious arguments that I think a lot of people think this is about. I would argue that this is a much more literal, legalistic harmonizing of existing Grand Lodge law.
Right, because we have the law that says one thing, another law that says another thing, and then a third law that says a third thing, and this kind of brings them all together.
Right. It allows for those extra sacred texts to be part of the furniture of the lodge, so that when you do confer a brother who is not of the Christian faith or of another faith tradition, the furniture there includes the sacred text of whatever article.
I love the 1A part of it where it says additional volumes of sacred law requested by candidates or members of the lodge and approved by the worshipful master. It is not mandatory.
Absolutely, and that's another great thing. This has got immense flexibility built into it, because it's not only does a candidate or member have to request a specific volume of sacred law, but the worshipful master then has to approve it. Yeah. So for those people who are going to be wondering if, somebody wants some obscure or even offensive sacred text, the worshipful master has the opportunity to say, yeah, no, we're not going to be doing that for this conferral.
And something to kind of, and I know that this was said in the text of this, but something to emphasize, right, is that these are in addition to the Holy Bible, right? There was a conversation that I was a part of where somebody raised concerns. They said, well, I'm a Christian and I would feel really uncomfortable if I walked into a lodge and the Bible wasn't there and it was only, and they mentioned a specific book of faith, right? And what we want to clarify here is this is in addition to the Holy Bible, right? You will never not see the Holy Bible on the altar.
I think we're running into problems with the placement of and what takes up more portion of the altar and when it's removed.
Yeah.
But I support it because it gives you the option. We may need to do a little more clarification on it for the committee on work to work on.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have a King James Bible on the altar during degrees regardless, which I love that.
Yeah. And so we also will be hearing reports from, it says here, referred to purposes and policies and the Committee on Work, right? So both purposes and policies and the Committee on Work will be issuing reports on this. And a lot of this may be, the vote may be highly influenced by those reports when it comes to Grand Lodge communication. So resolution number 7 is a name change. It's Rising Star Lodge number 429. Changing its name to Rising Star Ranger Lodge number 429. So let's talk about resolution number 8. I'll read the full text because it's a little bit of a shorter resolution. Whereas there continues to be confusion as to whether a member in arrears can hold an elected or appointed lodge office or participate in any Masonic function predicated on Masonic membership, and whereas members of lodges should be held to the same standard as a visitor set forth in Article 380, therefore be it resolved that Article 319 of the laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas be amended to read as follows. Article 319, automatic suspension. Lodge dues are due and payable 1 year in advance on January 1st of each year unless otherwise exempt, and if not paid on or before that date, a member shall be in arrears for his dues. Any member in and so this is the addition. Any member in arrears shall be considered to be not in good standing and shall not be entitled to participate in any Masonic function predicated on membership, full stop. On, and that ends the addition, or before 30 days before the last stated meeting of the lodge held before June 24th of each year, it shall be the duty of the secretary to notify each member in writing who may be in arrears for any dues, and if such member fails to pay such dues on or before June 23rd of such year, he shall stand automatically suspended for non-payment of dues without action by the lodge, and such suspension shall be recorded in the minutes at the first subsequent stated meeting of the lodge.
So essentially, you can't run for elected office unless your dues are paid by May, roughly.
Well, I think that it goes even further than that because it says any member in arrears shall be considered to be not in good standing and shall not be entitled to participate in any Masonic function predicated on membership.
So you can't go in a lodge.
So you can't go to a stated meeting after January 1st if you're in arrears.
Right.
So I think what this is clearing up is that you don't have to wait until the suspension on June 23rd for this to be in effect. Once you're in arrears, you can't go to a stated meeting. You can't do anything in which membership is predicated. Even if you're an officer, once you're in arrears, you can't participate in any Masonic function predicated on membership.
Yeah. So that would eliminate
effective January 1st. And this is one of those. This is a resolution that I'm not in disagreement with. I think that there should be more teeth with which a lodge can pursue members that are in arrears. I think that there should be more teeth on members who are in arrears that lodges can pursue. I think it needs to be there needs to be more avenues to pursue people in that regards to keep on top of them. But now I think that this pushes back the timeline when it becomes necessary to start telling people that they're in arrears or that they're running into the deadline for being in arrears. Because right now, this only says that you're going to send out notices starting at a certain period of time, correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, you're going to get, to be suspended, you have to be mailed. your notice of dues, and then you have to be it'd be snail mailed a notice you're going to be suspended if you don't pay the dues.
Certainly. So this seems to me that it would become incumbent upon lodges to be much more proactive towards the end of the year to tell people, hey, starting January 1st, if this resolution passes, you will not be able to participate in anything predicated on Masonic membership.
Yeah.
And that's a strong thing to do.
Yeah.
I think it would be a big shift in our culture, Masonically, at least in our lodge.
Yeah.
I just hate that
It's not just for our lodge, but for a lot of other lodges.
Sure.
Also, any Masonic function predicated on membership, I feel like that would be a lot of things, not just meetings, right? Like
Grand Lodge.
Well, no, because I would say like, hey, we're having a lodge dinner. Members of the lodge are invited to participate in this lodge dinner. Non-tiled, right? Non-tiled public setting, but it's a dinner for members of the lodge,
Fifth
right?
Monday this month, we're doing one. And
Yeah,
our
exactly.
gala is next month.
Our for example, our festive board, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our black tie gala, right? Those are for lodge members and for guests invited by members of the lodge, right? So, we always have members that we always have Masons attending that function that are not members of the lodge, but they are invited by members of the lodge. And of course, a lot of people bring their spouses, right? So I look at that and I go, that is a lodge function predicated on membership, right?
Well, and I think that that is an excellent point, because if the resolution were written so as to just be tiled events, then this language could be massaged as to make it only for tiled meetings or for where business is taking place.
And I want to bring up, that's not a criticism of this. When I say, hey, this is more events than just meetings, right? That's not a criticism. I actually kind of like that, right? Because as you say, Evie, that gives the lodge more teeth, right? I like the idea of saying, hey, you haven't paid your dues. You don't get to go to dinner.
I just don't like that dues are due January 1. So 6 days after Christmas. If you're a family man, that's really tough.
That's true.
But there are ways around that. You can do a monthly payment plan. You can buy an endowment.
Yeah.
You could pay in advance.
There's a lot of answers that would solve, I think, that concern. And I would like to also say, just like Gabe did, that many of the things that I'm bringing up are not criticisms. These are just clarifications so that when people out there who are listening to this podcast are formulating how their lodge or they individually would like to vote, these are things that you need to consider.
Yeah.
And also, let's just also be honest, jurisprudence is going to have something to say about this. And if this is a clarification, or there's other parts of Masonic law that already address this that we just need clarity on, then this might become a non-starter.
I think I can summarize why it's going to fail at Grand Lodge. It takes power from the lodges. If we want to remit dues for a brother or work out a payment plan with them, we can do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love the idea.
I would also mention with this one, notice that we've had kind of an in-depth discussion about something that, if you look at Resolution 8, is very small, that we're having such a deep discussion about. This is where I bring into the conversation again the importance of, if this is something that's important to you, be at Grand Lodge, because you're going to have an opportunity to hear the authors of these things. You're going to have a chance to hear their side of the story, and for you to make an informed decision based upon that as well. I think we would be remiss if we don't mention.
Yeah.
This is just a really interesting resolution, how it's worded. I'm interested.
I love the idea.
I love the idea.
We're going to have to see the discussion and specifically the report from jurisprudence, and I would bet that purposes and policies might have to make a report.
So
on
Resolution 9, this is going to be a great one. I love this.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go ahead and I'll read Resolution 9 since it's kind of short. Whereas Texas Masonry has a long history of reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas, hereinafter referred to as pledges. Whereas it is tradition and customary for the pledges to be recited in lodge meetings throughout our great state of Texas in order to honor each flag and what it represents. Whereas Article 333, entitled Order of Business, which provides the order of business for the stated meetings of the lodge, does not include the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag or the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag. And Whereas Article 333 should be amended to include the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag and the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag within the order of business for a stated lodge meeting. Therefore be it resolved that Article 333 be amended as follows to include the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag and the Texas flag. Article 333, Order of Business. At stated meetings after opening the lodge in due and ancient form, a quorum being present, and the order of business, unless otherwise ordered by the lodge or the worshipful master, shall be as follows. And this is the addition. Item 1, Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag and Texas flag. And then items 2 through 12 are as listed in 333, which is, minutes and petitions and special committees and balloting, and so on and so forth. So everything that you've seen. Followed up by the statement, each lodge shall conduct its business as nearly as possible according to the rules of order established in Articles 168 to 176, inclusive of the laws of the Grand Lodge for the government of the Grand Lodge. And that's not an addition, that's just a reiteration of the law as written. How do we feel about this, gentlemen? Be gentle.
I mean, if you have, I love our country, I love our state. If you have veterans in your lodge, you're going to have a lot of problems if you don't do this.
Yeah.
The problem's going to solve itself. I've never been in a state meeting in Texas where we didn't do both. I just don't want Grand Lodge law to tell me I have to do something.
Yeah.
I feel like when Grand Lodge law requires it, it makes it mean less.
Yeah.
If you're making me do something pro forma, it doesn't mean that I'm really pledging my allegiance to my flags. It means that I'm required to. And I don't want to be required to. I want to do it of my own free will and accord, which I think is a Masonic. Last time I checked, that's a kind of a Masonic thing. I like that idea better than I like being required.
We have international members who affiliate with our lodge.
Yeah.
Why would a brother from Canada have to pledge allegiance to Texas or America?
Yeah.
Especially before they're a citizen.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm going to be that guy in the room, and I'm going to use the phrase that I'm sure some of our listeners have probably already thought about, and that is the phrase slippery slope. I believe that this resolution is a slippery slope into having the Grand Lodge dictate exactly what lodges have to do. I think this could be used in a dangerous way as far as precedent. So I'm gonna be that guy, and I'm gonna throw that out there.
Right, and you're not saying that, and for our listeners, Cody's not saying that this resolution is inherently dangerous. It's the mechanism of this resolution.
No,
right?
let me clarify. I am by no means saying that the intent of this resolution is that at all. Yeah. What I am merely arguing is that the thought behind saying, well, we really should require A, can lead to we should require B, require C, require D. Where would it stop? Yeah. Do we open the door or do we keep it shut?
Well, and I want to say, as a proud American and an even prouder Texan, right? Something that I'm really big on when it comes to Masonry is Masonic tradition, right? And one of the things that we talk about in the degrees and in the charges and, in the lectures and whatnot, is, conformity to the forms and usages of the order, conformity to the traditions of the order, things like that, right? And we have a lot of things in Masonry that aren't legally codified, but that are still traditions, right? Where everybody kind of has an understanding. This is how this works, right? And it's not anything that's necessarily governed by the law, right? But how you speak in lodge and everything like that, how you address the master, things like that. Those aren't necessarily legal, but they are tradition. And so I think this is one of those things where we say, hey, tradition dictates that we do the pledges to the flags. And because we have established tradition, we don't necessarily need a Grand Lodge law that says we should. This is, I think, one of those 10-foot problems that we're looking at to try and solve at the 10,000-foot level.
And I just hate the idea of manufacturing or codifying patriotism. If you are a genuine, like if you love your country and your state, this is a no-brainer. Everybody's like, I've never been to a lodge that doesn't say these two things. And it's because we are all patriotic Americans and Texans. But it just doesn't feel right to say that we're making you say this, whether you are a patriot or not. We're going to make you say it out of Grand Lodge law directive. It just usurps all of the good things about it, and I hate to see that. All right, well, let's move on to resolution number 10.
All right, so we'll read this one real quick because the text is kind of short. Whereas the charitable activity of Masonic lodges in their respective communities has and continues to allow greater opportunities for exposure, fellowship, and member involvement of each lodge, and whereas not every lodge has a local chapter of the Order of Demolay for boys or assembly of the Order of Rainbow for girls, and whereas the current wording of Article 339 prohibits sponsorships of any other organizations with the exception of the Order of Demolay for boys or the assembly of the Order of Rainbow for girls, therefore be it resolved that Article 339 be deleted in its entirety. And I'll read the article as is. Article 339, lodge shall not sponsor other organizations. No lodge shall stand as sponsor for any other organization, even though such organization be composed exclusively of Master Masons or the wives, sisters, sons, or daughters of Master Masons, provided that this article shall not apply to the chapter of the Order of Demolay for boys and assemblies of the Order of Rainbow for girls. And that would be all of that would be deleted. How do we feel about that?
I don't have really strong opinions about it one way or another. Mm-hmm. I understand the arguments on both sides. Yeah. I know that organizations for kids specifically have come under great scrutiny of late because of child protection reasons.
Sure.
And, Freemasonry has gone to great lengths to ensure that the children who participate in these activities are safe when they are with their adult sponsors, and that there are steps being taken to ensure their safety. Yeah. And having said that, too, that there are a lot of other organizations out there in the absence of Demolay and Rainbow that have equal security for their children. And I think that it's important to provide maximum flexibility to lodges. I do think that it is, I don't think that there's really a way to codify people doing their due diligence when it comes to sponsoring organizations. A simple Google search about most organizations will reveal their the depth and breadth of their child protective policies and such. So I don't think that lodges have to do a lot of legwork to ensure child protection, but I still think that lodges should have the flexibility. If they want to sponsor a Boy Scout troop or a Girl Scout troop, I think that they should be able to, given the lodge's participants and membership. It shouldn't be Grand Lodge's law to say, or Grand Lodge's place to say that you can't sponsor any other organization except these. And it even says that, that there are no organizations, some of which that are even composed of our Masonic organizations.
Right. Job's Daughters, not even listed.
Right. And so there are a lot of organizations, even Masonic organizations, that would benefit from lodges being able to be sponsors.
Yeah,
or
like a book club. Right?
Exactly.
Because the way the law is written, your lodge can't even donate, right? Because that's what sponsoring is, right? Sponsoring, when you donate money, you are sponsoring that organization. Your lodge can't even technically sponsor a separate book club, right?
Boy Scouts.
Or Boy Scouts, right? And those are, for example, Boy Scouts, Adventure Scouts, Girl Scouts, like those are all, worthy organizations.
Well, we can have an Eagle Scout Recognition Day, but we can't give them money.
Exactly. And, how awesome would it be to be able to give a Boy Scout troop to sponsor them, and specifically for, Eagle Scout projects or whatnot, especially considering like the long history that Masonry has with scouting and specifically Eagle Scouts, right? It also doesn't have to be restricted to youth organizations, right? Like this is maybe a little bit more of a niche case, right? But let's say a lodge wanted to sponsor an Alcoholics Anonymous chapter, right? Like, why not, right? I think there are good reasons why we have this law in place, but it is also valid to examine why we have this law in place and to ask, are there benefits that we can gain?
I support it because it gives us the option to support other organizations.
Yeah. And I say this, our lodge, our lodge has a long history of supporting DMLA and a history of supporting our local Rainbow Assembly. And, I think those are great organizations for Masonic youth to be involved in.
Well, I think the bigger tie-in is the Grand Lodge of Texas, via our lodge supporting them, does not want to overtly support an organization that may do things that may not be super savory.
Right. And so that's where the lodge has to do its homework. And I think that's where we're going to see some of the discussion go, right? Well, it's like, hey, like, what happens if ... I think
it's also perhaps beneficial that obviously this resolution doesn't discuss this. I'm getting into the silence of this resolution. That there are organizations that are allowed. We have a list of organizations that are allowed to use Masonic lodge rooms, correct? Right. Why can't we have a similar list of organizations?
There's a few more resolutions later on about this.
Right. Oh, and so I think that is incumbent upon us to think about that there are ways that we can protect Grand Lodge and Freemasonry from unsavory players out there outside of Freemasonry, whether it's youth organizations or whether it's adult organizations or AA or book clubs or what have you. Mm-hmm. We can protect ourselves from that at the same time, making ourselves available to sponsor worthy and worthwhile organizations. Yeah. And this is one of those ways in which I think that Grand Lodge law unnecessarily restricts lodges and doesn't allow lodges to live into their context and into their communities.
Sure.
We need to be an outwards our lodge doors open to the public. We need to be a public-facing organization.
Yes.
And this is one of the ways that we can do that and show the kind of people and men that we are. But we need to be unshackled to do so. And while the Grand Lodge might guide us, I think it's important that we consider this resolution and what it says. And I'm interested to hear from Purposes and Policies on this.
Yeah.
See what they have to say about it.
Because that's one of the complaints that we hear, right, is that, Masons used to be so much more visible in the community, right? Well, this is a way for us to do that. Let's talk about Resolution 11 real quick. This is, in some ways, looks like a... administrative resolution, but it has to do with the way that we do nonprofit stuff.
Howdy folks, this is Gabe in the editor's booth. In the course of discussing this resolution, we brought a lot of questions to the table. We decided that those questions are better suited to a private environment than a public broadcast, so we have omitted this section of commentary from the final podcast recording. We appreciate your understanding and thank you for listening.
So resolution number 12 is about the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, and it basically just says that, hey, the Tall Cedars of Lebanon is an approved organization that can meet in lodge rooms in Texas.
We'd love their hats.
I would say that simply because of how cool their hats are, they should be approved.
Yeah, they have for those of you that don't know...
Google it. It is worth a Google.
Google Tall Cedars of Lebanon.
You have to be a Master Mason to join. So
yeah. So it is a Masonic organization, or let me rephrase that. It is an organization precluded on Masonic membership.
So it's Masons that have another hobby that want to use our lodge rooms for theirs. It's more revenue for lodges. I love it.
And the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, they're primarily a social organization. They have a wonderful charity.
What's their charity?
I believe it's for muscular dystrophy, but I might be completely wrong. Let's talk about resolution number 13 real quick. We say here, whereas a Masonic disciplinary violation exists under Title 5, Chapter 2, Article 509 of the Grand Lodge of Texas, laws if a member denies felony convictions on a petition for the degrees, and it is discovered after he becomes a member that he had convictions, whereas a Masonic disciplinary violation exists under Title 5, Chapter 2, Article 508, 15, and 16 of the Grand Lodge of Texas laws for failing to disclose a rejection of another lodge. Whereas a Masonic disciplinary violation exists under Title 5, Chapter 2, Article 508, 13 of the Grand Lodge of Texas laws to affiliate with a law under an assumed name with the intent to deceive the lodge or its members. Whereas these violations only pertain to Masons and not petitioners and are not contained in Title 4, Chapter 2, Article 411. Therefore, be it resolved that Article 411 be amended to read, Article 411, petitioner's total disqualification. If the investigation committee finds the candidate totally disqualified for any reason, such as the petitioner is found to be ineligible or has provided false information on his petition, the facts will be reported to the lodge, such report entered into the minutes, the fee and birth certificate return. False information on the petition shall result in total disqualification for 5 years, and Article 405 will not apply. The individual will not be allowed to withdraw the petition. The Grand Lodge of Texas database will be updated to reflect the disqualification and the reason for the disqualification. So this is kind of crunchy, right? Do you guys have any thoughts on this, or how do you feel about this?
I wish there was a way to name a candidate without actually voting for him. Goes, hey, this guy has a felony. I could prove it. Here it is. But we can't do that. We have to actually vote on them, investigate them, and then blackball them to do it. This kind of speeds it up, but it also takes the power out of the lodge's hands.
And the big challenge that I have with this, and living in a perfect world, this shouldn't be a concern. A perfect Masonic world, this should not be a concern.
Right.
But we don't live in a perfect Masonic world. We live in a world of human prejudices and human biases, and I can see the weaponization of this to really adversely affect members that are not liked by certain factions of a lodge, and to find some minor discrepancy in a petition because of how generic this is worded. It can be something as minimal as they provided an erroneous previous address,
right,
or a phone number was incorrect. There are a lot of things that can be roped into this kind of loose language to totally I'm air quoting here in the studio, totally disqualify someone and get them effectively blackballed for 5 years. And it takes it completely out of the hands of the lodge voting protocols.
Right.
That is what I really dislike about this, because there are situations where, let's say someone has made a mistake and they come clean to the lodge about it before the vote, or even after the vote. It doesn't really matter. There are procedures where if it's after a vote, there are ways that we can remove people by bringing them up on charges. There are ways that we can prevent someone and guard the West Gate from becoming a Master Mason once an investigation turns up that this person has been deceptive in some way. This seems unnecessarily punitive. And if a lodge is being diligent with their guarding of the West Gate, these sorts of discrepancies on petitions should not be something that a simple vote and blackball could not fix.
Right.
Well, the point is they can withdraw their petition before we blackball them.
Right. And I think that's my only objection. My only hard objection to this resolution is that it states that the petitioner shall not be allowed to withdraw his petition.
But it forces our hand. We have to vote on this candidate.
I think which way this resolution goes ultimately is going to hinge very heavily on the definition of totally disqualified, right? And I remember that when the last time that we talked about this one and we were looking up stuff and going through Grand Lodge law, I don't believe that we were able to find anywhere that codifies what it means to be totally disqualified as a petitioner. And the language behind that is pretty severe, right? So in a perfect world, I would imagine that that's some sort of, really severe thing, right?
Well, even a felony, we can, depending on what it is and how long ago it was, we can work around that.
Right, because it doesn't necessarily, because a felony doesn't necessarily disqualify you from being able to petition, right? It just, the thing that renders you the thing that's a Masonic offense is to not disclose that you committed a felony, right?
And there are some, and the problem that I have with this though is that it doesn't even say felony. It uses felony in one of the whereas provisions, but when it gets down to the actual total disqualification addition, it doesn't just say felonies is what makes you totally disqualified, or criminal activity makes you totally disqualified, or lying about criminal activity disqualifies you. It says false information on a petition. You write down the wrong number for your zip code. That is false information. And so that can be used and weaponized against someone in such a way that it really becomes problematic.
Or you live in a city where the zip code might have an extension on it or something.
Right.
Like
that. I can see this being weaponized to keep certain people out of lodges and to make sure that lodges only admit the kinds of, air quotes again, kinds of people that lodge wants.
On that same note, the individual lodge has the right to pick who they join their lodge.
That's true, right? So, but it's a different way, because a lodge can choose who it wants to join the lodge, but that's done by balloting, right? And so I think the concern that Evve's bringing up here is that this is a way to circumvent balloting, possibly, right? If used for malintent, right?
I just don't like the language of this. It's really imprecise. Total disqualification is not well defined. Yeah. It's only based on false information. False information can be very nebulous, as we all well know. Yeah. And I think I see the intent. Here's the silver lining to this. I see the intent. I see why that this might be an important resolution.
Sure.
I think that this is not the ideal execution language-wise of said resolution.
Yeah.
And
we're
there was
really going to have to see.
Yeah, if Purposes and Policies comes out, I'm interested to hear what they have to say. I would be interested in seeing if any amendments are recommended, what the entrants of this resolution have to say about it, if they're going to plan to amend it in any way. I'm really interested to see how this could be massaged into a really worthwhile and an effective resolution. But as it's written right now, I see a few too many holes that I'm just a little concerned about to be super supportive of this. But I'm keeping an open mind. I will say that I'm not closing my mind to this.
We want to hear the argument before.
I want to hear some good arguments. I want to hear arguments on both sides. I have no doubt that there's going to be a line of people to either support or
if you
speak
feel
against it.
Very strongly that a candidate should not be a member of our lodge or the fraternity at all, we should have a way to know this guy's not good. We know why. But we're breaking other rules by saying that. We can't campaign against a candidate.
Right.
But this doesn't really clear that up.
Right. This doesn't, and that's where I say that this could be a very effective way of guarding our guest Westgate in a way that gives us more teeth to do so.
I mean, if you lie about a felony,
I'm all about that.
And we find out about it, by all means, you're blackballed for indefinitely.
Yeah, and there are rules for that, though. That's the thing, that this adds an unnecessary layer as it's written. But again, I'm keeping an open mind. I want to like this resolution. I actually, despite what it might sound like I'm saying, I want to like this resolution. I think that there's a lot of potential here. Depending on what gets amended and what Purposes and Policies has to say.
Sure. All right. So resolution number 14, it is an administrative resolution that's been submitted by Right Worshipful Rick Townsend, who is our Grand Treasurer. It has to do with the way that the funds for our Grand Lodge employee retirement benefits are handled. It's useful for the Grand Treasurer's office, and that's good. Resolution number 15 is another administrative resolution that makes the lives of everybody in the Grand Secretary's office a lot easier. It basically says that the Grand Secretary shall publish such proposed resolutions and statements of availability electronically and provide one printed copy to the Secretary of a lodge upon request.
So just for reference for listeners, all of us in the room right now are reading the copy that was mailed to us by the Grand Lodge. Mm. But we could have easily printed this and saved the Grand Lodge, I don't know, $10 of postage?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
And not only that, time-wise, we received the electronic copy of the resolutions, before we received...
2 weeks ago.
Before we received the hard copies.
Yeah.
So not only does this save money, it also speeds up the entire process. And I can only imagine the amount of work. I've worked in offices that produce little pamphlets like this.
I love the book and I appreciate it. And I support this resolution 100%.
Yeah, I love hard copies, but I can print my own out if I need one.
Yeah.
Buy a laser printer.
And that's what I did.
And I don't. If anything saves the Grand Lodge money, and I think that this does,
and speeds up the process.
To us getting to review these, I think it's a great thing, and let's do it.
I think a lot of people just don't understand how expensive postage can be.
Let's get to 16. This is my favorite one.
Okay. Oh, it's your favorite one.
It is.
So resolution number 16 is lengthy in its text, so we're just going to summarize it here. What resolution 16 does is add a requirement for the elected Grand Lodge line officers to hold proficiency in Grand Lodge ritual as certified by the Committee on Work through a specific Grand Lodge ritual certificate. And that covers opening and closing and calling to refreshment and calling to labor of a local lodge in all its forms. And in addition to that, opening the Grand Lodge of Texas, closing the Grand Lodge of Texas, and calling the Grand Lodge of Texas to labor and refreshment, and also opening and closing a representation of the Grand Lodge of Texas. And this would apply to all the Grand Lodge line officers prior to their installation. And this is submitted by all 5 members of the Committee on Work.
I love the idea that Grand Line officers should be proficient in opening and closing lodging and Grand Lodges. Mm-hmm. However, we also have the Blue Lodge rules right now where we have the Form 101 where they have to be certified by the district, the DDGM that they could open and close the lodge. The Grand Lodge is just a few more words.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that if they want to make it more difficult for Grand Line officers to be Grand Line officers, by God, let them. Let them. Yeah. I have no problems with this. It doesn't affect me in any way. And it's going to ensure or help ensure that the people who we do elect, we have some reasonable assurance that they are going to be able to open, close, and manage a lodge in some meaningful way.
It essentially just adds the Grand Lodge certificate.
Mm-hmm.
So A, B, C doesn't matter as long as you have the Grand Lodge certificate.
And I think that there are some provisions in here for you don't have to get the Grand Lodge certificate if you have like a lifetime esoteric certificate. I think there's some exemptions, but the point is this is one of those areas where we talked about earlier where this is a 10-foot at the Grand Lodge view. This is Grand Lodge managing Grand Lodge. They can do with the Grand Lodge as they see fit. That is, while we might be, I know Gabe here is now officially a past master and gets to be a part of the member. He's a member. Brandy and I are not. Yeah. I think that I don't see a problem with this.
Yeah,
I really don't.
I support it 100%.
So let's talk about resolution number 17. I'll read this one in full. Whereas Article 512 of the Grand Lodge of the Laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas describe the status of a Mason under allegations of a Masonic disciplinary violation, including restrictions on the rights of said Mason, and whereas 509 of the same describes the automatic expulsion of any Mason for, among other reasons, the conviction of a felony in a state or federal court, and whereas the laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas are silent regarding the status of a Mason who is indicted by a Texas state court grand jury or federal grand jury, and or is held to answer or bound over by a sister state court jurisdiction, and whereas because of this silence, it is possible for a Mason to be indicted or held to answer and yet still enjoy the pleasures and benefits of a Mason despite his pending felony proceedings. Therefore be it resolved that Article 512 be amended to add the following paragraph and read as follows. Article 512A, status of a Mason under indictment or held to answer. When a Mason in the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Texas is indicted by a state or federal grand jury or held to answer a felony charge due to information being filed or such charging instrument as the jurisdiction may require, his standing will be a, quote, Mason laboring under indictment, end quote, and his restrictions similar to that as the aforementioned, open quote, Mason laboring under Masonic disciplinary action, close quote. Otherwise, his rights and privileges shall be unaffected thereby until his charging instrument withdrawn or his case finally disposed of, subject to the parameters of Article 509. This article does not prevent the filing of allegations of Masonic disciplinary violations for similar alleged conduct.
So the key word is indicted. Indictment is not a conviction.
Right. An indictment says that a trial needs to occur, right? And I'm not a lawyer.
Here's my take on this, though. However, we have the provision for a Mason laboring under what was the language?
Masonic disciplinary action.
So a Mason laboring under Masonic disciplinary action. A Masonic disciplinary action is one yet to be adjudicated.
Yeah, they're not.
So they're not guilty of said offense, but they are laboring under that. So the point here is that this protects, in my view, this is my opinion, take it for what it is, as a layperson who is not a legal expert, but this functions to protect the Freemasonry from someone who might be convicted of a felony. In the same way that someone who might be convicted of a Masonic charge is similar being protected.
He's
so they
laboring
can't,
under charges.
Right. They can't. That person can't run for office, so they can't be put into a position of power.
Yeah.
Whereby they might have to be removed, or it might bring embarrassment to the lodge.
Yeah.
Or to Freemasonry in general. And while I am sensitive to they are dealing with issues before they are found guilty of something, this is just to insulate Freemasonry and lodges from negative publicity. And let's also just stay for the record. We live in a world where people can be canceled for like something they post on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter. And then that suddenly has a way of metastasizing into any organization that they are therefore associated with.
Right.
And
you could be dragged down by any one of your members for almost anything.
Right. And so this is just a very practical and I think prudent way to insulate lodges and Freemasonry in general from potential bad actors who have made poor decisions. And we are seen as proactively taking disciplinary actions on our part so that we are insulated from that culture that is evolving. This is, I think, a very prudent way to address that while respecting the rights and privileges of the Mason who's going through this.
I would hope that your Blue Lodge would recognize that a member is going through something and maybe have an opinion that maybe your treasurer should be someone that's under indictment for embezzlement, because that is an elected position in Texas, or at least in our lodge it is. Maybe the Worcester Master shouldn't be someone that's under indictment. But again, an indictment is not a conviction.
Yeah.
The way Masonic trials work is they're concurrent. They don't relate to each other. You can be found innocent in a Masonic trial and be convicted. But if you're a felon, then depending on what the felony is, you can be kicked out.
Yeah.
Well,
so I think there's good points on either side of the aisle here.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good point.
Again, I want to hear the story because this is going to be a good one. So
this
now
is
number 18.
Yeah, number 18. So let's read this one real quick. And this is a longer one, but I'm going to read the whole thing because there's been some discussion, right?
Ties back to the holdover resolution number 11.
Correct. Whereas each year there are Brother Master Masons that are unable to attend the annual communication because of reasons of health, scheduling, and financial difficulties. Whereas technology has been developed and used that would allow the broadcast of the annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Texas within a lodge room of a subordinate lodge of the Grand Lodge of Texas, so that Brother Master Masons from across the great state of Texas could view the proceedings of the annual communication. Whereas the Grand Lodge of Texas has an interest and duty to ensure that its proceedings are properly conducted, including the application of technology that is utilized therein. And whereas the permitting subordinate lodges of the Grand Lodge of Texas to establish local viewing of the annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Texas within a lodge room of a subordinate lodge would enable additional Brother Master Masons and subordinate lodges to be more involved with the Grand Lodge of Texas and annual communication thereof. Therefore be it resolved that Chapter 2, Title 1 of the Laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas shall be amended as follows to provide for the broadcast and viewing of the annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Texas by Master Masons within a lodge room of a subordinate lodge of the Grand Lodge of Texas. Article 2B, broadcast and local viewing of the annual communication. The annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Texas shall be broadcast for viewing within a lodge room of a subordinate lodge of the Grand Lodge of Texas and shall be restricted to Master Masons. Said broadcast shall utilize technology that is approved by a majority of the Grand Lodge trustees. Each subordinate lodge shall decide in a Master Mason's Lodge by a majority vote of the members then present to view the broadcast of the annual communication. Said viewing shall be held within the lodge room and restricted to Master Masons. The subordinate lodge shall notify the Grand Secretary on or before the first Monday in December preceding the upcoming annual communication of said decision, and include the names of the Master Masons that will be attendants at said viewing. Upon receiving said notice, the Grand Secretary or his designee shall coordinate the registration of said subordinate lodge for viewing. The subordinate lodge shall be responsible for all technology necessary to view the broadcast of the annual communication. Article 2, Annual Communication. No change in the first two paragraphs. To defray the expenses incurred in holding such regular or special called communication of the Grand Lodge, each member of Grand Lodge as herein defined, each lodge representative, and each Master Mason of a Texas lodge must pay a $25 registration fee to attend an annual or called meeting of the Grand Lodge of Texas. Here's the addition to this paragraph. A subordinate lodge that registers to view a broadcast of the annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Texas in accordance with Article 2B shall pay a registration fee of $150. And to be clear, Article 2B is the entire Article 2B that I read earlier is an addition, brand new. What do you guys think of that?
They can't vote.
They can't vote. That's true. Right.
And it has to be in a lodge.
And it has to be in a lodge.
And it can only be Master Masons.
Right. And it has to be listed Master Masons, right?
And those Master Masons' names have to be submitted to the Grand Secretary prior to the event occurring.
Mm-hmm.
I see no problem with this, with the exception of these Master Masons have technology they can text their influence to their proxy voter or their member that's voting for them.
Well,
but that's actually a positive, I think.
I was going to say that I don't know that is necessarily a concern, right? It's a thing, right? It's a thing that could happen, but I don't know if it's a bad thing.
I don't see any negatives to it.
Right. And so I think
the only negatives are, the elephant in the room is holdover resolution number 11 that we talked about first. That is the giant elephant in the room here. This stands in stark contrast to that. This actually embraces.
That's why I like it.
This stands in stark contrast to that, in that it embraces technology. It uses it in a very wise way that defers to the Grand Lodge trustees to be choosing technological methods of streaming that are secure, that respect Grand Lodge's secret activities, that sets up delays and things that we've already seen in place. And it further restricts it. So you're not just going to be sitting at home in your pajamas. This isn't a Zoom meeting.
Right.
This is, it's happening in a lodge room.
Yeah.
With only Master Masons. And it says that it has to be restricted. And you're registered for the Grand Lodge. And if it's restricted to Master Masons, that at least implies to me, if not codifies, that this has to be a tiled setting for those people
I would love
in
to
the
add
lodge
that language
room.
that needs to be a tiled meeting.
I would love to see that language changed so that it specifically says tiled.
So you say, hey, before doing this, you have to open a Master Mason's
You have to
lodge.
open a Master Mason's lodge so it's tiled.
I don't object to that.
But I
that
think,
makes sense.
but the implication here, the implication is that it is a tiled meeting, because how are you going to ensure that only Master Masons are present unless you go through a proper opening?
We've had floor school.
Yeah, I mean, because that you can have.
But that's that's very informal. I think that it implies it here, but I would love to see it codified.
Sure.
In a tiled environment.
So
Because
you'd like
if
to
the
see
Grand
a little
Lodge is
bit more
tiled,
formalized sort of thing. Yeah, sure. Why not?
if the Grand Lodge is tiled, why shouldn't the extension of the lodge room be in those subordinate lodges?
And I think this is a happy medium, right? Because we're not saying, hey, this is going out to every Joe Schmo and his dog and his wife in their living room. This is going out to your lodge, and you're not going to get to, hey, you might be a Master Mason in good standing. You're still not going to get to see it unless you've registered. I think that's totally fair.
And you don't get to vote.
That's
All
true.
you get to do is see it.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important for people who obviously, like we talked about earlier, who for whatever reasons can't make it. They can't afford to make it. They can't, they're concerned about their health. they're aged and maybe they are like traveling to Waco from Fort Worth isn't an option.
Yeah.
I really like this.
Or they're
I think
traveling from
McAllen,
right?
10 hours,
or El Paso, right?
Right. This is the kind of resolution.
Borger.
Yeah, this is the kind of resolution that respects our traditions, respects the technological restrictions that we need, and puts into place reasonable restrictions for participation that I think any reasonable person would probably say this sets the bar very high. And it doesn't say that the Grand Lodge has, like, just any lodge can do it. Your lodge has to be set up. It's your responsibility to have a lodge that has an internet connection that's appropriate, that has a computer that's appropriate, that can navigate the security protocols necessary. It is the lodge's responsibility. It is not Grand Lodge's responsibility to do all this stuff.
Well, your DDGM has they can check and make sure you're secure on everything too.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, but it's still the lodge's responsibility.
Right.
There is no onus on Grand Lodge to do any of this.
The fact that you can buy the proceedings tells me this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
This should pass no problem.
This should, but I think it's going to be predicated on how the discussion around holdover resolution number 11 kind of plays out. Because, for those of us who are in Gen X and millennials and Gen Y and Gen Z,
well,
I think that our comfort and familiarity with technology makes it kind of a no-brainer for us. But there is a generation that is not as comfortable and not as warm and fuzzy with technology. And they're probably not listening to this podcast in all likelihood.
I carry an Android phone in the lodge with me. I've got a Samsung watch. I know many other brothers have iPhones and Apple Watches. You can't, unless you turn them off and put them outside the room in a locked closet, you can't guarantee that the audio is secure.
Yeah.
The secret stuff that we have, you're not going to get that on this anyway.
Right. So, the technological aspect of this, the concerns over technological security, if there's a single member in your lodge that's carrying a smartphone into lodge with you,
we all do.
Yeah, your lodge is not secure. Let's just be clear about that.
Yeah.
Facebook is hearing everything that you're listening if you have Facebook on.
I get ads for Masonic Revival every time I go to lodge.
Right.
Yeah. There's a reason why at a certain level of security clearance, you cannot carry a cell phone into the room. Right. Like that's just the reality of it.
There are places where some of you might know I was an air traffic controller in the United States Air Force. Yeah, there were some places where we had to go where you had to put your phone in a box that was a Faraday cage so that you could receive no electronic communications while you were in said facility. Yeah. So if you really want to get secure, you're going to have to implement a lot more security than what even lodges are doing right now. And we all admit that everybody has a smartphone, or most people have a smartphone. Yeah. There's reasonable security, reasonable minds have to.
We have our secrets, and this is not going to hurt them.
This is not going to hurt that. Yeah. I like it, but like I said, I'm open. I'm going to be an open-minded person about this. I'm going to be listening for the people who are arguing against it. I'm really interested in hearing what the committees say.
Argument against it.
I would be curious.
I'm open-minded, but I
want to see where the fees came out, the dollar amount. How they justify those?
Right, yeah. And I would really love to hear the people for this defend this, because I know that there are some arguments that they're going to be anticipating. So this will be an interesting resolution to see.
Oh, yeah. Next one, cipher book.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
This is a spicy one.
Spicy.
All right. Resolution number 19 referred to purposes and policies. Whereas the Grand Lodge of Texas has authorized the publication of a Texas Masonic cipher book by McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply since 2017. And whereas this cipher book is a valuable tool for the members of subordinate lodges to perfect their mastery of our ritual, and whereas it would reduce confusion and strengthen ritual proficiency if subordinate lodge members were allowed to refer to the authorized cipher book in the following situations on lodge premises: when rehearsing the ritual of conferring degrees, or rehearsing opening and closing lodge, or rehearsing the catechism of the 3 degrees. Therefore, be it resolved that Article 508 of the laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas be amended as follows. Article 508, certain other Masonic disciplinary violations. It shall also be a Masonic disciplinary violation for a lodge, a committee, or any combination of Masons or an individual Mason, ... 24. And I'll try to speak this as best as I can. 24, the words possess and or are struck out. Use a cipher/code book, and the words on a lodge premises are struck out and replaced with a tiled meeting, or to use a cipher/code book or access a cipher/code book in any form, including electronic access in the presence of a candidate when instructing the candidate in the esoteric work of a Masonic degree. So the old version would read, to clarify, the old version would read, to possess or use a cipher/code book on a lodge premises, right? The new version would say to use a cipher/code book in a tiled meeting, right? I have a piece of input in one of the whereases, but how do you guys feel about this?
I understand people's reticence to want to use cipher books. I understand that there's a lot of concern over cipher books. There are a lot of people who don't even like that cipher books exist.
Sure.
They do. They're used. And the place that we don't want them to be used is in a tiled meeting. Mm. We don't want them used in the formal business, in our degrees. We want those to be as perfect as possible. I think that I'll just say it. I think that that this plan, it does all the things that I think that we should be doing in protecting our secrets and our our rituals that we do from people cheating with a cipher book. But it also makes the cipher book what the cipher book needs to be, which is an aid to memorization. But ultimately, my point here is that the cipher book exists whether we want it to or not.
It's not going away.
It's not going away. There's nothing that anyone who's listening to this can do that is going to make that cipher book go away. By the way, the cipher book is also authorized by the Committee on Work. So for anybody who's worried that this is going to change existing law, the only thing that this changes is that it allows for, let's say, a floor school that's going on, and you have a debate going on about whether it's this or A. Mm. You can now look to your cipher book and get some clarity on it. Now, does that guarantee that the cipher book is absolutely correct? We know that there's always going to be typos, and we know that the Committee on Work should have the final say on that, and that if somebody on the Committee on Work says that the right answer is this and the cipher book is wrong, then defer to the Committee on Work. Yeah. But that's ultimately what this is for. Whenever you're doing a floor school, how do you know that you're getting it right and you're not just teaching in perpetuity wrong information? The cipher book helps to prevent that.
You would defer to somebody that has a esoteric teaching certificate from the Grand Lodge.
Well, what if you're out in the middle of Podunk, Texas, and no one has an esoteric teaching degree or teaching certificate?
I would challenge anyone that's against this resolution to visit 3 lodges in their district and go to a Master Mason degree and say, would this be A-Cert qualified? If not, maybe you should look at the cipher.
We have a system in place to help lodges learn good ritual. And the cipher, in many ways, is a crutch. And the cipher is incorrect in many places. And I would be in favor of this resolution if the cipher book was owned, published, and maintained by the Grand Lodge of Texas. But as is, it is owned, maintained, and published by a third party that is outside of the state of Texas.
But where did they get it?
Right. Well, and that's
they didn't just go print it and make it up for themselves. But that's the thing,
like that's I'm not super concerned with where they got that knowledge, right? Because you can talk to guys from, you can talk to DIs, you can talk to members of the Committee on Work, and they'll tell you, I've looked at the cipher book and it's wrong and they can rattle off like 24 different places, right?
Sure.
And the reality is,
are those 24 places, if everything else was correct, except for those 24 places, would Texas Masons be doing better ritual work?
Well, the fact that
would Texas Masons be doing better ritual work except for those 12 places? Because I can tell you right now, I have been to many a lodge where their ritual work is substandard. And that,
sure.
and that if
that happens, but
it doesn't just
they
happen,
have
but it's
access
happening
to those cipher
ubiquitously,
books, right?
But they're not allowed to have it on premises, and they're not doing it in floor school. I believe.
I don't think the
firmly.
cipher book would help some of those lodges.
Well, they might
I was
not,
Gonna, I was
but
going
you
to
have
say,
to-
like, I
but
don't
if-
think that having the, I don't
Then what
think
would
that
help?
saying that having the cipher book in the lodge room when not in a tiled meeting would make that big of a difference for those lodges.
I think that if they had the ability, because a lot of the reason that I think that there is objection to even doing floor school is that there's no one who knows the ritual well enough to teach a floor school.
Yeah.
So if you have a cipher book, that gives you at least a better chance of doing better floor work than if you don't and there's no one there to teach you.
Well,
and if we really did have a great way of teaching esoteric material to our lodges, we wouldn't have the lodges that can barely open a lodge, can barely close a lodge without a giant mess going on. We wouldn't have degrees that have to rely on other people. My point here is that is the cipher book ideal? Absolutely not.
Well, I think the end goal is not to be reading it as you're doing the degree, be able to recite it.
Right.
And we don't have, none of our officers that are currently in our lodge we all pass, we all turn in our, what's the word I'm looking for?
We are an urban
Proficiency.
lodge.
You're going to have situations where a lodge is out there, way out, and they might have a DI that's 2-3 hours away, right? But the reality of it is what they should be doing is coordinating with their DI and saying, hey, we're going to set aside a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday morning, and we'll post you up in one of our members' houses, or we'll pay for your hotel room or whatever. And we're going to have a school of instruction, and you're going to teach us a bunch of stuff. And they might have to do that.
But that's
they
get
once
to do
once
that
a month for
but now you're asking a lodge to put up a lot of money and the expense and the time that is outside their time.
Right.
What I'm suggesting here is that while a cipher book is not ideal, it gives them instant access to material that they need that then can be supported by the ways in which we normally train people. So we can get them, if we can get them 90% of the way, and then the DI,
if it was an official publication of the grand body, right? And I'll talk kind of from my experience. For the listeners that don't know, I am a district instructor for the Grand Chapter and the Grand Council in my home districts, right? And one of the things that you see in chapters and in councils is that a lot of people will say, hey, I don't know this part. I'm going to read from the ritual book, right? Or, there's a ritual book that exists that is published by the grand body. And this is one of those slippery slope things. And I know that we don't like to bring up slippery slope stuffs on the podcast because it is a logical fallacy. But you just have to look at chapter and council to see that in this case and in this way, the slippery slope really did happen, where we authorized a cipher, and then later on we authorized a plain text ritual with certain parts that were ciphered, like the obligations. And now it is commonplace, even though the law says that only one person, the designated prompter, is permitted to have a ritual book in the room when the chapter or the council is in operation. You'll see a lot more copies of that ritual in practice, right? And to a certain extent, hey, we need to enforce the law that's already on the books, right? But the reality is you do see a slippery slope happen, and people start relying on that. I think that if we authorize use of the cipher book for non-tiled meetings, it's only a matter of time before we start seeing it getting authorized for the use of tiled meetings, where you might say, okay, for the purposes of tiled meetings, one person can have the cipher book. And then next thing you know, you have half a dozen people that show up with the cipher book in their hands, even though the law says that only one person can be the prompter. Because we've seen that happen in Grand Chapter and in the Grand Council, right? And it's one of those things that once you go there, there's no coming back. If we told our companions in the chapter and council, we're taking away the ritual books, right? There would be a riot, and justifiably so.
Maybe there should be a riot. But my point is that all of the rules that this puts into place regarding a cipher book, it essentially it recognizes a need that needs to be met, and people are going to use the cipher book regardless. And that Pandora's box has already been opened.
I think a better argument is, okay, if you use a cipher book to learn a ritual and you perfect it, are you less of a Mason than someone that did it mouth to ear?
I would argue no, because Masonry is a lot more than just ritual. But I think that just based off of what we've seen in other bodies, I worry about our ritual integrity. Because even though Masonry is a lot more than just the ritual that you know, the ritual that you know contributes a lot to the experience of members and of candidates. And but
nobody's arguing that you should know the ritual.
Right. But what I'm saying is there is a slippery slope that does exist and we have seen in other places.
Well, but
right?
that's in other places. And we can absolutely learn from those other places and prevent those things from happening.
Yeah. I think I would feel substantially different about this if the cipher book was owned, maintained, and published by the Grand Lodge of Texas.
I would argue that I would be substantially more concerned about it, because then that means that the role of the district instructor becomes essentially null and void. The cipher book essentially replaces them. And it means that there are going to be necessarily mistakes, which means that we're only getting someone 75, 85, 95% of the way to proficient.
Right.
And that requires the district instructor to then be part of this and say, while I appreciate that you use the cipher book for this, here's the mistakes you're making.
Right. Well, and I can actually speak to that, right? Because in the chapter and in the council, we actually have like I said earlier, we have a plain text ritual, right? The district instructor's role becomes, okay, we have a plain text ritual. Can you execute that correctly? And if not, for what reasons, right? And so it becomes a lot more about the mechanics, like and this is, you hear this word a lot in commandery contexts, the tactics, right? The district instructor teaches you how all of these moving parts work together, right? Because all of the spoken stuff, the spoken stuff is written down in plain text. And we have sections in italics that say, okay, that person should execute this, right? A lot of those things are hard to parse just from a ritual book standpoint, right? As a reader, you might read that and think you have it correct, but actually executing it in real life becomes a lot more complicated. So the role of the district instructor changes. It doesn't become null and void, right? It doesn't become superfluous. It's just a very different relationship, right? If it was published by the Grand Lodge of Texas, I would say you would still have questions as to the accuracy of the cipher, right? And you would say, hey, there's this symbol, I see an at and the letter T, and then there's a square or whatever. What does this mean? And the DI can answer that. And then the DI can also answer questions of like, okay, you've delivered this line. Now, how do you execute this piece of unspoken ritual, right? So it's just a different relationship with it. But the difference is then that is something that if it's a publication of the Grand Lodge, then it's something that the Committee on Work can interface directly with. It's something that the DIs can interface directly with.
What I'm saying is that the cipher book being able to be used for floor schools can't be used in a tiled meeting, can't be used to teach catechism, can't be used by Master Masons to teach esoteric work to those who are not Master Masons. Those are all common sense things that make sure that our lodges are producing good ritual. I
just have a lot of objections to this as written, and until we have a cipher book that we own as a Grand Lodge, I just can't support it.
What if it's?
I'm less likely to support this resolution if the Grand Lodge of Texas own the material, because I see the slippery slope that you're talking about. That is when that's when we put like cooking spray on that slippery slope, and we go zipping down.
What if the ritual
Chevy
book
Chase speed
was part of the the Grand Lodge app. You give a ritual book that you download as part of the app. It's authorized by the Grand Lodge of Texas.
I would
Well,
hate
but it would
every
have to
minute
be
of
in,
that.
in Cypher.
Yeah,
I
it would have to be
don't
owned
think
and
the Grand
published
Lodge
by
of
the Grand
Texas
Lodge.
should be publishing it.
I want the Grand Lodge to get revenue out of it.
My argument is predicated on the fact that the cipher book should be done by a third party, because that always puts the onus on the lodge to make sure that their ritual is correct, and they're constantly having to go
And you could geotag it where you're not at lodges.
to the DI.
But that doesn't that kind of work against the thought that, hey, this lodge may not have a DI available, or they may not have something available, right? Because that's the whole purpose.
But if a DI comes in for one visit, which is how many times do DIs typically get to visit a lodge?
Yeah, well, as many as the lodge requests, basically.
So how many times can a lodge realistically get a district
A
instructor?
couple times a year.
A couple of times a year.
Yeah.
And if that person is local, if that person is not local, then the lodge usually has to pony up the money to have them travel.
If you're
and
screaming
stay.
and crying that you have no DI, you will get a DI. They'll figure it out.
But my point here is that you still have to pony up some money to make sure that DI has travel expenses, because if you're having to travel,
it's a courtesy.
It's a
courtesy.
courtesy.
You don't have to
I was
pay
going
them.
to say,
but let's be honest, it's not required, but it is a courtesy. As a Freemason, am I going to ask one of my brothers to travel and have to stay overnight at their own expense so that they can teach me ritual? No, absolutely not. If our system was so great at communicating the rituals, then there would be a lot better rituals going on. And so this is simply a way to do that. Is it perfect? No.
I would love
Is
to
it
see
ideal? No. Would I love to see a greater, more district instructors, maybe 2 or 3 district instructors per district, so that and have a requirement that every lodge, instead of it being a Vanguard award, that every lodge every year has to be evaluated on opening, closing, and at least one of each of the 3 rituals if one is being conducted.
Form 101 if you're
But ultimately, I am open to all the arguments out there. However, I would like to see a resolution like this.
Cipher book's not going away. It's already out there.
Exactly. That we've already uncorked that genie.
Yeah. I would just say that we can make the situation better in ways that are more friendly and consistent for the Grand Lodge of Texas, for the instruction teams of the Grand Lodge of Texas, and
I am open to all of those ideas.
Safer. Yeah. Well, okay. So we
now that we beat that dead horse.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you got to go to Grand Lodge. You got to listen to the discussion. You got to listen to it. I really want to hear what Purposes and Policies says on this one, and I bet you the Committee on Work will have something to say on this as well. Let's talk Grandmaster's recommendations. I guess kind of the preface to the Grandmaster's recommendations that Cody had brought up, and Cody is not here with us during this portion of the recording because he had to leave for a shrine function, and we wish him the best at that function. Most of these, the discussion we have had has been, we're really going to have to listen to what the Most Worshipful Grandmaster says, because even though there is a written presentation of these in this booklet, the Grandmaster always elaborates more during the session of Grand Lodge, and it's always valuable to hear. So this is much more of an abbreviated sort of conversation that we'll have here about the Grandmaster's recommendations. But Grandmaster's recommendation number 1 has to do with lodge consolidation, and it streamlines the lodge consolidation process. Basically, one of the things that it does here is that instead of a 20-day written notice, it changes that to posting notice of lodge consolidation vote and discussion outside the lodge room and via the usual communication methods used by the lodge's secretary for membership notices such as email, social media, or written newsletter. And then sets it as a new business agenda item on the next stated meeting as opposed to the second stated meeting thereafter, right? So, and it changes a majority vote of the lodge to some stated meeting thereafter to a 2/3 supermajority vote of the lodge. So what this does is it makes lodge consolidation a much easier, much faster process. Do you guys have any input on this other than that? I mean, I would basically say there are probably some legitimate objections to this. There are probably some legitimate statements in favor of this, but
I've had some conversations with some brothers about this that are much more learned about the consolidation process than I am. And I've heard people on both sides. On the one side, say that this faster consolidation process benefits lodges that are in kind of dire financial straits, that they might not be able to financially sustain their existence beyond the time period that this requires, because oftentimes lodges delay their votes for consolidations until the very last minute, and then the finances are gone, and suddenly they are having to go into the red, and that is a bad thing for a lodge. So this streamlines and speeds up that process, so that financially destitute lodges can quickly consolidate with lodges to deal with their solvency issues. The other side of that coin, though, is that when you speed up the process, that means that people who have interests to consolidate, or that there is somebody with a less than...
there's less safeguards.
Yeah, there's less safeguards to abuse of this policy. The faster something happens, the more it's likely, or the more it's possible, I should say, to be abused. And so the people who are concerned about abuses of this power, because this is a power, no doubt, that the line leadership of that lodge could use at any moment. It speeds it up. It makes it easier to do. And some people object to that. I am sensitive to both sides. I'm not sure that I have a foot on either side of this fence. I see the benefits of both. I'm interested to hear more of the Grand Master's recommendations, and I'm also interested to hear what Purposes and Policies has to say about it.
Yeah, I think you've laid out a really good, rundown of both sides of this argument for sure. Grandmaster's recommendation number 2 has to do with real estate, and the very short summary of this much longer resolution is that historically and per the law, any real estate transactions that a lodge engages in are referred to the Committee on Civil Law. And what this recommendation seeks to achieve is to create a committee on real estate that would handle real estate transactions instead of referring this to civil law, which would free up civil law to handle, civil law, and would allow a more purpose-driven committee for real estate. This is one of those where we're going to have to see discussion, but I really don't see any objections to this. But you never know what you're going to see, right?
I'm usually very skeptical of new committees being created at the Grand Lodge level, but this is one of those areas where I think it's kind of necessary because I think
it's
anybody
streamlined stuff,
right, and anybody in the legal profession will tell us, and if you have a friend who's in the legal profession, they will tell you that more and more law is becoming more and more specialized.
Yeah,
and so having people that specify their expertise in the world of real estate, that's useful. It's very useful, and especially for lodges that are dealing with real estate issues, whether it's the buying and selling of property, having that resource available to them will be, I think, invaluable. So my tendency is to go for this, but again, I'm listening for.
In reality, the biggest asset most lodges have is their real estate.
Absolutely, so and protecting that and having people who understand.
I don't mind a little more oversight on that side of it.
Agreed. This is one of those areas where I think that Grand Lodge could use a little bit more.
If you're at the point where you're selling your property, you need a little bit of help.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about Grandmaster's recommendation number 3. I'm going to summarize this because it's lengthy, but it has to do with our landmarks, or what's called the ancient landmarks. I'll skip the whereases. We'll go to the therefore be it resolved part. Therefore be it resolved that the Grand Lodge of Texas, AFNAM, adopt the following to be the landmarks or ancient landmarks of Freemasonry in Texas. Article 13, Ancient Landmarks. This Grand Lodge recognizes the following ancient landmarks. 1. Masonry teaches morality through the allegory of 3 degrees of an operative science. 2. Each candidate for Masonry must believe in the following. A. The existence of God. B. The immortality of the soul. And C. The divine authenticity of the book of his faith. 3. Candidates for the degrees must be qualified as men of a certain age and of good reputation. And 4. Some element of secrecy must exist, setting the Mason apart from the rest of society.
This reminds me of lodges that get involved in doing vision and mission statements. because this does read very much like a vision and or mission statement in that it has to be specific enough to be relevant, but it has to be general enough to be universal. I don't disagree with anything here. I'm kind of interested to hear a little bit more about it. But if this were in the law book, would I really have a big issue with it? This is all stuff that's on a petition anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's do it.
Well, it's all reference to Grand Lodge officer installation, not Blue Lodge.
Right. Well, and that's my point, is that if you are, I suppose, a Grand Lodge officer, you by default have to have acknowledged these things in your Blue Lodge.
Yeah. For our listeners that don't know, the ancient landmarks are things that Masonic organizations recognize as being absolutely true and necessary, right? You can ask, how many ancient landmarks are there? And the answer depends on which Grand Lodge you belong to, because there are Grand Lodges that recognize 3 ancient landmarks. There are Grand Lodges out there that recognize 10 ancient landmarks, or 7, or 15, or 20. And a large number of Grand Lodges all around the world do not recognize any ancient landmarks. They just state that they exist. And that is, I believe, the current state of the Grand Lodge of Texas, where we say there are ancient landmarks, and then we just don't say what they are, because that is up to interpretation, right?
And this is the closest thing that, as a non-sectarian organization like Freemasonry, this is probably as close as we're ever going to get to like a creedal statement.
Right.
As some of you who are, in churches might recognize affirmations of faith or creedal statements and things like that.
So we have here Grandmaster's recommendation number 4, and Grandmaster's recommendation number 4 splits the Masonic. We have a committee at the Grand Lodge level that is called the Committee on Masonic Education and Service. What this recommendation does is split that committee into the Committee on Masonic Education and the Committee on Service, right? And it elaborates what the duties of the Masonic Service Committee are, because previously the Committee on Masonic Education and Service has been the committee that's been tasked with aiding during disasters and, helping the Grand Lodge assist during public calamity, basically, right? But the Committee on Masonic Education and Service is primarily oriented to Masonic education, because that is more of its standard function. So what this does is let the Masonic basically let the Committee on Masonic Education and Service provide education, and then it creates a more specific, more specialized committee that does disaster relief and other stuff.
I think that there was a resolution last year that did not pass that was in this same realm as well, if memory serves. And at that time, I think I probably said that I didn't like the idea of
it was
another
presented
committee.
very differently.
I would probably say that this is not a bad idea.
Yeah. So Grandmaster's recommendation number 5 has to do with the past master's apron. Again, I'll just summarize this, but basically it creates a provision for us to have, more flexible past master's aprons. It adds language here that says, in addition to using the past master's aprons now being worn, it shall be permissible for past masters to wear aprons with the same design and insignia as provided for the worshipful master, and here's the addition, with some other appropriate design or emblem significant to Masonry upon the bib, while, end addition, the addition of the arc or quadrant under the points of the compasses would be optional.
When it comes to the flexibility that this recommendation provides, I think is great.
Grandmaster's recommendation number 6 has to do with alternate dispute resolution, and I think this one is going to be a lot more in-depth, a lot more complicated. It's certainly beyond the scope of kind of what we normally talk about, but this has been referred to civil law, to purposes and policies, and to Masonic jurisprudence. And it is a long series of paragraphs about alternate dispute resolution that provides a different avenue when you're talking about Masonic disciplinary violations, makes things simpler in a lot of ways. This is a recommendation that we have talked about in private as a lodge, It's a recommendation that we've talked about in our district at the MWSA level. And it's after those conversations, it's one that is dense and complicated enough that we felt it was maybe not appropriate to put on the podcast and broadcast to everybody, because it's something that deserves a lot more contemplation and discussion than we can provide you guys. So that was kind of our take on it.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, it's super legally dense for those of you who decide to read it.
And that kind of brings us to the end of our resolutions and recommendations. If you want to learn about who all has made themselves available for the various positions, that is in the booklet that has been issued by the Grand Lodge as kind of policy. We don't really talk about the candidates that have made themselves available for positions on the podcast. But yeah, that kind of concludes the state of things. I know that this has been a really long episode, so we want to thank all of the listeners for hanging in there. We always have a lot of fun with this episode, so we appreciate y'all tuning in and listening.
Do you want to mention the Grand Lodge discount for Masonicon?
Yes. So, as tradition, we are going to open up ticket sales for Texas Masonicon during Grand Lodge Communication, and for the weekend of Grand Lodge Communication, Texas Masonicon tickets will be discounted pretty heavily. So if you're interested in becoming an early buyer, we always have the Grand Lodge discount run, after which we will have the less discounted early bird tickets. Get them while they're available.
Website pending.
Those ticket sales will be available come Grand Lodge Communication. But if you want to learn more about Texas Masonicon, you can always visit us at texasmasonicon.com. That's texasmasonicon.com. And you can email us for more information about our lodge or the podcast in general at info148@fortworth148.org. You can visit us at fortworth148.org or at fortworthlodge.com. This is Gabe Yagish signing off.
This is Evve Kirkendall signing off.
Brandy Patton signing off.
Thank you all.